Today we don't have a boat, but I asked her if we should get it out. I didn't know our backyard is it's a good backyard. We're glad it's back there, but it's a mini swimming pool without the swimming pool. We have water everywhere, and then here's the good news: once it really gets once the water really gets saturated, then the first time I heard a sump pump, I didn't know what it was. I told Darlene there was some noise down in the basement, and she should go check it out. And I found out that we had a sump pump. Well, now when the water gets really bad, our sump pump runs 24/7, but it's sending the same water out. The water goes out into the yard, and it comes back down in the sump pump, and then it goes out into the yard, and it's just an amazing thing. But after about 3 days, it shuts off, and everything is good. I am glad that you're back tonight. I met this morning young man who is Betty Brown's brother-in-law. And he shook my hand and he said, you tell that Roger, this is exactly how I said, you tell that Roger that this is like the second or third time we came to hear him and we got stuck with you, and you let him know I said that. And I assume he was trying to be funny, but you know, sarcasm, you don't see the humor at the point, but I took it as a joke. I assume that's what he meant, but I'm still not sure, but that's what he said nonetheless. Tonight's lesson is, it's going to be a little different, so I want to tell you up front that number one, I'm glad that you're here. You could have stayed in. It's not the easiest to be out when it's this raining, and depending on how you drive and how you see and all that neat stuff, it could be a little bit difficult, but I do want to thank you for coming out. We're going to look at, actually, I got to be honest, I'm not exactly sure what passage Cohen read, but I'm going to be in Nehemiah. But I will tell you this, though. Cohen's probably a little tired today because he carried Russ and I yesterday to victory in the golf outing. So he's probably just a little tired from having us on his back and carrying us for 11, 12 holes. But I'm going to start off and go ahead and read Nehemiah chapter 1, and then just to give you a little reference, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read chapter 1 so we can see the exact situation where he is, and then we're going to go back to the end and see what they accomplished, and then we're going to go back to the beginning and see if we can't figure out how they pulled it all off. So let me start off with Nehemiah chapter 1. The words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the month of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanai, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates are destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. And I said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps covenant and steadfast love with those who love him and keep his commandments, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer of your servant that I now pray before you day and night for the people of Israel, your servants, confessing the sins of the people of Israel, which we have sinned against you. Even I and my father's house have sinned. We have acted very corruptly against you and have not kept the commandments, the statutes, and the rules that you commanded your servant Moses. Remember the word that you commanded your servant Moses, saying, if you are unfaithful, I will scatter you among the peoples. But if you return to me and keep my commandments and do them, though your outcasts are in the uttermost parts of heaven, from there I will gather them and bring them to the place that I have chosen to make my name dwell there. They are your servants and your people whom you have redeemed by your great power and by your strong hand. O Lord, let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight to fear your name, and give success to your servant today, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man. Now I was cupbearer to the king. I don't know. Do you know what a cupbearer is? Do you almost know what a cupbearer is? Where do you think a cupbearer ranks in status in a kingdom? If you just listen to the term, it sounds like they don't rank very high. But if you actually look up the term and see exactly what it is, I'm going to go ahead and go somewhere else now because I've changed things a little bit. But listen to this. Here's what a cupbearer actually is. A cupbearer was an officer of high rank in royal courts whose duty it was to serve the drinks at the royal table. On account of the constant fear of plots and intrigues, a person must be regarded as thoroughly trustworthy to hold the position. He must guard against poison in the king's cup and was sometimes required to swallow some of the wine before serving it. His confidential relations with the king often give him position of great influence. The position of cupbearer is greatly valued and given only to a select few throughout history. Qualifications for the job were not held lightly but of high esteem, valued for their beauty and even more for their modesty, industriousness, and courage. In the post-exilic period, Nehemiah rose to high-ranking palace position of the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes, the sixth king of the Medo-Persian Empire. The position placed his life on the line every day, yet gave Nehemiah authority and high pay, and was held in high esteem by him, as the record shows. He had financial ability and would indicate that the office was a lucrative one. So he says he was cupbearer to the king. He asked God for success before he goes before the king. Why was he praying? A fellow brother from Jerusalem, gave him the indication of what was going on over there. The walls were broken down, the gates were burnt, and the people were kind of in disarray. So, my question becomes, when you get bad news, what do you do? What do I do? Nehemiah hit his knees. Nehemiah, in the midst of hearing the worst news that he could hear, hit his knees and prayed to the almighty true living God, and within that prayer turned what looked like an unbelievable problem that he could not handle and turned it into a dream that he would eventually put plans behind, and by faith in God, bring about great, great, great results. If we all got that, I could sit down now, because really that's how life works. It really is. No matter who you are or where you're from, you're going to have challenges. And how you learn to handle those challenges are going to have everything to do with where you end up in life and what peace you might have or might not have. If you decide to really step out and go after what we would call dreams, then it becomes paramount that you solicit God in your behalf, that you make sure that your dreams line up with God. Here's my quick take on prayer and dreams. If you can pray to God for it, then you have permission to pursue it. Do you know what I mean by that? I can't pray for somebody else's mate to have. I can't pray that God will help me rob a bank. I can't pray that God would hurt my neighbor because I don't like him. But I can pray, Lord, that Darlene can find a job and we can build a business and we can turn our life around because we both lost our jobs. That I can pray for and I can pursue. I can pray for strength when I lose a loved one. That I can pray for. When I make a decision and maybe it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to or thought it should, then we back up and punt and go at it again. We painted something and it was kind of big and we don't like the color of it. So we got to back up and repaint it, and we got to buy the paint all over again. But that's what you do when it doesn't work out. But we've also painted stuff that's worked out tremendously, and we love it. So the question becomes, Nehemiah hears this unbelievable news, and he doesn't hesitate. He goes to the almighty, true, living God in prayer. So that's what we're going to look at. But as we know the place is in shambles, right? So here's what I want to do. I want to skip to the end. Let me do this. Let me give you just a little bit more of a background here on who Nehemiah is and what they're doing, and then I want to skip to the end. So Nehemiah is our central figure. It contains some of his own records, but he's not the author of the entire book. Part of Nehemiah could have been written as the same author who wrote part of Ezra. Some of you might already have put that together. Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem around 445 BC, 13 years after Ezra the scribe. He also returned in 433 and 423. The theme, the Lord's protection of his people and their need to be faithful in worship and keeping the Mosaic law. The purpose and background, Ezra called the returning exiles back to covenant loyalty and obedience to the law. Nehemiah rebuilt the city walls so that the community could be protected from its enemies who might take advantage of them. Here's some of the themes in the book. Number one, we already discussed this one a little bit. The Lord hears prayers. Number two, the Lord works providentially, especially through powerful rulers, to bring about his great purposes. The Lord protects his people, and because he protects his people, they do not need to be afraid. The Lord is merciful and faithful to his promises, despite his people's wandering and sins sometimes. Worship is at the center of the life of God's people, which includes willingly, joyfully giving of our resources. God's people need to be on guard against their own moral weakness. Our biggest challenge sometimes is the eyeball staring us back in the mirror. Here's a simplistic outline of the book. Nehemiah learns of Jerusalem's dilapidation. I mean, it's pitiful to say the least. The wall is built despite difficulties. Then we have a record of those who returned from the exile. We have the reading of the law, and the covenant is renewed. The population of Jerusalem and the villages, the priests and the Levites are all back, and they dedicate the wall. Nehemiah handles all the problems in the land and puts the people back in good standings with God. During the time of Nehemiah, the Persian Empire had reached its greatest extent, engulfing nearly the entire Near East. In 539 BC, the Persians under Cyrus the Great defeated the Babylonians and absorbed the lands of Israel and Judah, which they called beyond the river, into their empire. The next year, Cyrus allowed the people of Judah, now called Jews, to return home and rebuild the temple of the Lord. If you remember, it was the Babylonians that took them into captivity in 586, I believe. Several waves of returning Jews settled in Judea. In about 445 BC, Nehemiah was granted permission to rebuild Jerusalem's ruined walls. The walls had been in ruin for over 150 years, destroyed by Babylon. I'm going to start just to read a little bit here and listen to how this works. I'm going to start in chapter 6, in verse 15. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul, in 52 days. And when our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem, for they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Isn't that interesting? Nehemiah decides to have faith in God and pray to him and do something about it, and the nations take note that they had to have the help of their God to do that. A lot of people are returning now because Nehemiah went back and built the wall. Verse 73 says, chapter 7, so the priests, the Levites, the gatekeepers, the singers, some of the people, the temple servants, and all of Israel lived in their towns. And when the 7th month had come, the people of Israel were in their towns. In chapter 8, it says that Ezra got on a podium and stood up in front of the people and read the law of Moses. And he read from it facing the square before the water gate from early morning until midday. And Ezra the scribe stood on a wooden platform that they had made for the purpose. And Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. And as he opened it, all the people stood. And Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all the people answered, Amen, Amen, lifting up their hands. And they bowed their heads and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. They read from the book, from the law of God clearly, and they gave the sense so that the people understood the reading. It was dilapidated, it was ruined, they were in derision, and now they have restored their hope, their faith, and their worship in the Almighty true living God. So Nehemiah is the governor now. Him and Ezra working side by side, and they go back and he's reading the law, and the people are moved in a tough way. They know what they've been through, and they're having a hard time. And here's what Nehemiah and Ezra say to the people. For this day is holy to our Lord, and do not be grieved, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. The joy of the Lord is your strength. Sometimes, if we're not careful, we can become victims when in reality we're really not victims. It's just a different avenue coming up. They restored the Feast of the Booths and celebrated. Chapter 9, the people of Israel confessed their sins before the Almighty true living God and asked for forgiveness. God does an unbelievable lesson here in chapter 9. He goes back and tells the people how that God did mighty wonders for them, bringing them out of Egypt, and he fed them manna. He guided them by the day, guided them by the night, and they rebelled against him and turned away from him, and they cried to him, and then God came and redeemed them. That's kind of Israel's theme, isn't it? God blesses them. They're okay for a minute, then they rebel, then they cry out, then God blesses them. They're okay for a minute, then they rebel. Then God disciplines them, then they cry out. That's kind of their vicious cycle. The real facts are, that's a lot of people's vicious cycle. We want to do the right thing. We want to serve the Lord. We know we're not perfect. And then we just get close enough to the fire where we don't really burn, but we can smell smoke on us. And then we come back and say, okay, I'm going to serve the Lord. I'm going to try to do the right thing. I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be. And we all know that worship isn't the only way to serve God, but it certainly is a part of it. And we're good for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, and then we dissipate just a little bit. We were going to go, but then I didn't know the game was going to be on. And then things get a little rough. Maybe things aren't as great as they should be at home or at work, and so we come back and we're going to plug back in again, and we dissipate again. And I'm not suggesting that that's funny or that it's trivial. What I'm saying is it's hard for us to stay focused on a daily basis to serve the Almighty true living God if we don't put things in place to do that. If we don't have our own personal thing that we do to be in touch with God, it's difficult. It's like trying to be a part of a sporting event and you don't like the sport, but you got to go to practice every day. And you got to play this game, and you really don't want to play it. It's rough. But at the same time, with just a little tweak in the attitude, it can be probably the most wonderful thing that's ever happened. We all face it from time to time. We all have difficulties. We all have challenges. They confess their sins. So he gives that beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lesson there. It says, watch this. He does this 5 times just in about 10 verses. Their enemies came in, they suffered, they cried, God blessed them, and it's just really, really, really wonderful reading. Therefore, you gave them into the hand of the peoples of the lands. Nevertheless, in your great mercies, you did not make an end of them or forsake them, for you are a gracious and merciful God. That's what it says at the end of one of them. And then it says, because of all this, we make a firm covenant in writing on the sealed document the names of our princes, our Levites, and our princes, our priests. So they get out the covenant, and they're going to put the leadership's name on the covenant because they're rededicating themselves as a nation and as individuals to serve the Almighty true living God again. And that's exactly what they do. And everything is wonderful. The leaders in Jerusalem take part in it. The priests take part in it. The Levites take part in it. The Levites are now getting their due, their contribution. They're giving part of their contribution to the high priest. They're actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then listen to what it says in chapter 12, verse 27. And at the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, they sought the Levites in all their places to bring them to Jerusalem to celebrate the dedication with gladness, with thanksgiving, and with singing, with cymbals, harps, and lyres. And the sons of the singers gathered together from the district surrounding Jerusalem and from the village of the Netophathites, also from Beth Gilgal, and from the region of Geba and Asmith. For the singers had built for themselves villages around Jerusalem, and the priests and the Levites purified themselves, and they purified the people in the gates on the wall. Then I brought the leaders of Judah up onto the wall and appointed 2 great choirs to give thanks. It says that he appointed a choir on the south side of the wall, and he appointed a choir on the north side of the wall. Because they're going to offer thanks and praise to the Almighty true living God, because just 52 days at least ago, the place was in shambles. They were whining. They didn't know what to do. That was until Nehemiah heard it. Others were doing the best they could. And then it goes on to say in chapter 13, here's some of the things, some reforms that Nehemiah made. He put the office back in the temple. He took Tobiah, the Amorite, out of the temple because of his lineage, he was never supposed to be in the temple. He corrected the negligent offerings. They were selling and doing everything on the Sabbath day, and he corrected it. It's the Sabbath day. You don't do any work on the Sabbath day. He corrected their marriage habits. They were marrying women who worshiped idols, of which meant it wasn't long before they were going to be worshiping idols. He corrected that. He set in reform, and here's what it says at the end of chapter 13. Here's what Nehemiah says. Thus I cleansed them from everything foreign, and I established the duties of the priests and Levites, each in his work, and I provided for the wood offering as appointed times and for the first fruits. Remember me, O my God, for good. That's the plateau they're on. Just a few minutes ago when I read, they were in the deepest of depths. And now they're on the plateau, serving God faithfully and doing all that they're supposed to do. Now I'm going to go back briefly and take a look at Nehemiah and see how he spearheaded this wonderful construction. It says that they had great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem was broken down and its gates were destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and wept. He was moved and mourned for days and continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. He knows who God is. He realizes God is awesome. He asks God to give him strength, to give him success. And then at the latter that we already read, he says, now I was cupbearer to the king. Now watch this. This is the unfolding of his prayer with God. We saw where they ended up. Look where they start. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, I took up the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had not been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, why is your face sad, seeing you are not sick? This is nothing but sadness of heart. Then I was very much afraid. I said to the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my face be sad when the city, the place of my father's graves, lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Then the king said to me, what are you requesting? He prayed to God for success before this man, right? He's the king. Listen to what he says. So he prays to God again. So I prayed to the God of heaven. And then it says, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's graves, that I may rebuild it. That's why he was mourning. That's why he was uncomfortable. That's why he was weeping. And that's the words exactly what he asked the king. Listen to what the king says. And the king said to me, the queen was sitting beside him, how long will you be gone, and when will you return? The king actually is helping him with his dreams. Because if you don't have a date on what you're trying to achieve, then you haven't turned it into a goal yet. It's still a dream. But it goes from a dream and a vision to a goal when he gives him a date. So it pleased the king to send me when I had given him a time. And I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters, listen to what he asked for. The king only asked him what was wrong with him. But listen to what Nehemiah says. If it pleases the king, let letters be given to me to the governors of the province beyond the river, that they may let me pass through until I come to Judah. He's seeking safe passage. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the fortress of the temple and for the wall of the city. Remember, they were burned down. And then listen to this, what he adds at the end. And for the house that I should occupy. You have not because you ask not. And the king granted me what I had asked. And for the good hand, watch this, and the king granted me what I had asked, for the good hand of my God was upon me. Now watch what happens. We saw what he asked for, but watch what the king blesses him with. Then I came to the governors of the province beyond the river and gave them king's letters. That's what he asked for. Now listen to this. Now the king had sent with me officers of the army and horsemen to get timber. And the king sent soldiers and horsemen with him. David would say, my cup runneth over. Now watch this. Here's an interesting thing. Do you know that when you have a dream, something that you want to do, something that you envision, or something that you aspire to, it's very, very crucial who you share that with? Do you know that most dreams never get off the ground because your friends or your family or people who know you know that you can't do it, clip it before you even flap your wings and get off the ground? You only share your dreams with people that want it for you as much as you want it for them. Now, once you get strong, it doesn't matter. But in the beginning stages, it's crucial. We saw where Nehemiah got his strength, didn't we? He got it from the Lord. And watch what he says here just in a little bit. But when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Amorite's servant heard this, it displeased them greatly that someone had come to seek the welfare of the people of Israel. Because Nehemiah has a dream, their goal, their job now, their dream is to not let it come to fruition. They weren't really doing anything anyway, but now that becomes their job. That's how life works sometimes. Why? Because they know you. You know what a great guy is, don't you? He's an ordinary guy from another town. That's what a great guy is, because we know you. You know, see, you eat your grandmother's pie so much you just like it. When your friends come over and eat it, they think she should have a bakery. It's just the way it works. You got relatives like I do. When you go to reunions, your parents have to tell you not to eat all their food because you get it all the time and the visitors never do. My aunt was that way. My dad's sister. We buried my dad's last sibling 2 weeks ago. It was tough. But her family was that way. She'd make this great pie. And then she'd have to fight with her kids to tell them to leave it alone so that we could have some of it. They'd go in there and get her pie first. They live with the lady. They're right around the block. Watch this. It almost sounds like somebody's coconut cream pie in here, but we won't go there. We'll just stay on target. We'll stay on target here. He says, so watch this. So he says, seek the welfare of the people of Israel. So I went to Jerusalem, and I was there 3 days. Watch this now. So Nehemiah's got passage. He's got soldiers. He's got horsemen, and he goes to Jerusalem. He didn't ride in with a trumpet. Hey, guys, we're here to save the day. Watch what he does. I went to Jerusalem, and I went to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me, and told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. He's safeguarding this thing. He's really trying to get a handle on it, his faith in God, to bring this about. We know the ruins. He wept. He cried. We know the end result, but he's in the beginning stages. He says, there was no animal with me but the one on which I rode. I went out by night by the valley of the gate to Dragon Spring to the Dung Gate, and I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that were broken down and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate and the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal that was under me to pass. That's how rubble was everywhere. Then I went up in the night by the valley and inspected the wall. And I turned back and entered into the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. And I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, and the rest who were to do the work. He hasn't told anybody yet. It's between him and God. Then I said to them, listen to this. Listen how he shares the dream with them. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in? How Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned? And then he plants a seed. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. And I told them, listen to this, and I told them of the hand of my God that had been upon me for good, and also of the words that the king had spoken to me. And they said, let us rise up and build. Do you think they would have said that had he not said that God gave him this dream and the king okayed it? There is no way they would have went against the king. Not with Nehemiah. But Nehemiah had a dream, and he let him know that God was behind it and that he had already got clearance from the king. And the people saw the situation. They saw Nehemiah, and they got a little spark in their heart. Perhaps we can do something with Jerusalem. Perhaps we can do something with this unbelievable city that our forefathers built, yeah, even the city of David, the city of Zion, the city where the almighty true living God visits his people in the temple. Perhaps we can do something with that. Now listen to this. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Amorite, event, and Gershom, now they got another buddy with them, the Arab heard of it, they jeered at us and despised us and said, what is this thing that you're doing? Are you rebuilding against the king? Then I replied to them, the God of heaven will make us prosper, and we, his servants, will rise and build. But you have no portion or right or claim in Jerusalem. He's moving on the power of God to rebuild the city of Jerusalem, and people are sneering at him because they see it in rumbles. And they're saying that he's going against the king. Now, what's interesting about that? Whose approval does he have? Who sent him out with horsemen and soldiers? The king. And yet, sometimes we know what we know, and we hear somebody else say something, and we hesitate or we become fearful. Did not the children of Israel do that going across the Jordan? God had promised it to them. They went over there and saw the big fruit and said, my goodness gracious, the people who live here must be unbelievable. It's not what Caleb and Joshua said. They said, if the fruit's that big, I can only imagine what everything else is like. Why? Because God's already promised it to us. Yeah, we got to do the work. Sure, we got to have faith. Sure, we got to make adjustments. Yeah, we got to grow. You got to learn things you don't know. But isn't that what faith is? Sometimes we think faith means, I know that I can do this, so I'm going to do it. That doesn't require faith. I don't want to get too personal, but Darlene and I talk about that. We had 2 months where we had every day together, which was good, by the way. She might have been ready to go back to work, but I enjoyed it. It was good. But you know what? We came to the conclusion that when you work at the same place for that many years, whether you like it or not, it doesn't require faith to get there. It requires dedication. It requires commitment. But it doesn't require faith. You know how to do it. It requires faith to say that the Almighty true living God will bless me with something somewhere else that I don't know about right now. That's faith. We're all there somewhere in our lives, are we not? That's what faith is. That's how we get to praise Him and thank Him. That's how we get to grow, by trusting Him. And I'm not talking about jumping off a cliff. I'm talking about using the talents and abilities that you have to get where you want to go by relying and trusting on God. Then Elisha, the high priest, rose up with his brothers, the priests, and they built the sheep gate. So they started off the work. Somebody built a gate, and they got excited. Now, here's an interesting thing about Nehemiah. It says that he was an ordinary man whose preparation for ministry came in Persia palace as the king's cupbearer. But he became an extraordinary leader through his diligence in prayer. First chapter, we know that he prayed. We saw that. When the king asked him how long he would be, he prayed to God. When the knuckleheads said that they were going to stop him, he prayed to God. When the people came out to physically stop him, it says that he prayed for protection day and night. After the false accusations that he was going to rebel against the king and everything else, they prayed to God that he would strengthen his hands. Chapter 6, verse 9. He says that God's hand was upon him. After sharing his dream with the other men, he said that God's hand was upon him. Why Nehemiah? He wasn't the only one that saw the place in shambles. Why not somebody else? Which ultimately means what? Why not me? Why not me? Why not me serve my God a little more faithfully, a little more honest, a little more truthfully, a little more trusting? Why not me try to watch my words? I had a friend of mine, true story, told me that he had prayed to God and something good had happened. You know what he said after that? True story. He said, knock on wood. I said, are you kidding me? Knock on wood? You prayed to God for a blessing and you got the blessing and you're going to knock on wood? Fall on your knees and thank Him. Knock on wood. I know we just say stuff, but are you kidding me? Knock on wood? And then he looked at me and said, well, come on here. I said, no, I'm not getting on your case, but it just blows me away. You said you prayed to God and He healed you, and you're knocking on wood. I don't know what that is. My mom was the queen of saying statements. I mean, we couldn't walk under a ladder. We couldn't pass a black cat. We couldn't do anything. We couldn't scratch our hand. We couldn't rub our nose. My mom had all those down. We couldn't do any of that stuff. Man, when I got a certain age, I said, Mom, come on now. You mean to tell me if I walk under this ladder, something's going to happen to me? No, I wasn't crazy enough to walk under it because my mom already had me brainwashed. But I knew there wasn't just something under the ladder. So knock on wood. Have you ever said that? I know there's a big, I confess in front of all of you. I don't even know what that means. I know when people use it, and I know how they use it. But here's what I do know. It's not the same thing as saying praise the Lord. It's not the same thing as falling on your knees and thanking God for answering your prayers. I really believe when you look at what the Bible teaches and how prayer works, if we would keep track in our mind or our heart the things that we pray for, that God blesses us with, and then thank Him, it would create within us a wellness of appreciation and gratefulness. I don't know how else to be thankful. Isn't that how it would work with our own relationships? When you thank people that you know around you. I mean, I know you got a job to do, and I know you have to do this and you have to do that, but thank yous goes a long, long way. I know you make the dinner every night, but man, thank you for this excellent meal. It's not that big of a deal, but you know what? It is a big deal. It's a very big deal. When we say thank you, it carries weight. It carries a lot of weight. So he's thanking them. Nehemiah building the wall. The people are excited. At one point in the story, they have weapons in one hand and tools in the other hand because they are committed to get this job done. They're dedicated. They're not going to pull back just to pull back. So I have a saying that I always say. Coach, you remember this. You and your family are going on a vacation that you've planned for a year. You're packed up, you're ready to go, you can't wait to get there, wherever it is. You're 50 miles from the house and you get a flat tire, what do? You know what you do. You fix it and get on down the road. You know what? That's how life works. You have a dream, you have aspirations, God's giving you the okay, you're pursuing it, and then you hit a pothole or you get a flat tire, and the reality is you should fix it and get on down the road. Because if you stop, you might not start again. Dreams are fickle. They can be wonderful, but they're fickle if you let them slip away. But if you keep them near you and you pray about it, then all of a sudden it becomes enormous. Then all of a sudden it becomes the way you live, the way you walk, the way you talk. Then it becomes really a part of your fabric. Then when it happens, you're grateful and thankful, but guess what? The whole world's surprised, but you aren't. You know why you're not surprised? Because you prayed about it and you worked toward it for the last 2 years and nobody really knew it. And now that we see it openly, we go, wow, we thought it just happened. We didn't know you were working on this thing. Why? Because that's how it works with God. Sometimes it happens instantly. But if you look at most of your achievements, it happened over time. It happened over time. Nehemiah, what a great, great, great example for us. Sharing his dream. So watch this. When you share your dream and when you have a dream, you're going to have challenges. You're going to have roadblocks. I've asked a lot of people a lot of questions. And here's a resounding answer that doesn't mean anything but it's true. There are people who are very successful in myriad of ways, whether it be marriage, whether it be family, whether it be education, whether it be business, whether it be your job, that if they knew it was going to be that difficult, they would have never started it. Because they got started and they got committed and they learned how to do it 1 hour at a time, 30 minutes at a time, 10 minutes at a time. Lo and behold, look where they are. Look where they are. Now watch this, and please don't take this the wrong way, all right? Don't take this the wrong way. So I have 8 brothers and sisters. You know I had a challenge, I think I told you, reading in school. Watch it. Do you know how many of my brothers and sisters have degrees? Not that that matters. It's just, it was a goal of mine. Me. Now watch this. Do you know how many tries it took me to get it? probably don't want to know this. There's a class that's the most difficult class I ever took, and I think I've learned more than anybody else in it because I had to take it 3 times. 3 times. I was just telling Todd that when you get a 0, it takes a lot to bring it up to something. You know, you can work with a 50 and a 60 and a 70, but a 0? You got to almost get all A's just to get a D. I had to figure all that stuff out. When he said turn it in, he meant to turn it in. But watch this. Here's the point I want to make on that. Not that I'm anything, but watch this. That was on my prayer card. That was on my goal with my God when I left my house in 1979 to go to Ohio Valley College. Did a little bit like the Israelites. Got blessed. Went off the tangent. Cried for the Lord, came back, got blessed. Went off the tangent. We've all been there. Kind of in school, kind of not in school. Then I'm going to work. Everything except for what I should have been doing. Except for sometimes timing changes. Now, what's your point, Harry? Here's my point. My point is, regardless of where we are in the dream process, if we stay plugged in and pray to God and do the best we can with what we have, moving toward faith, we can do wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things. I don't care if it's cutting your neighbor's grass, if that's what your goal is. Maybe they can't cut it. It doesn't have to be something miraculous to anybody else. But do you have a dream in your heart right now that you've stirred up that you said, I would like to do, but I can't now because I'm too old, when in reality you know you're really not? You don't have to do it, but you're not too old. Just say you don't want to do it anymore. Or maybe because something else happened, now it doesn't seem like it's worth it. I don't know. But I'll bet you, if I got out a sheet of paper and gave it to anybody, everyone in here, and said, give me a list right now of 5 things you wish you could do before your time here is up, every one of us would come up with 10 or 15 or 20. I hope you rekindle that. I hope you write it down. I hope you do like Nehemiah and pray about it first. And then I hope you only share it with key people in your life. And then I hope that you go after it. If you get a chance, read the book of Nehemiah. I didn't really do it justice in the amount of time that I had, but when you look at where he is, when you look at the situation in Jerusalem, and you look at how they worship God at the end of the book, man, it's worth looking at. Why? Because of the almighty, true, living God. Loves us, cares for us, and hears our prayers on a daily basis. We never close without giving someone an opportunity to obey the gospel. Why? We don't know. This might be your day. This might be your night. This might be your time to say that I, with the faith that I have, I'm going to step out. Why? Because I've been wanting to. Because I believe in God. I believe his son died for me. This will be a beautiful night. Doesn't have to be tonight. It could be some other time. You could call someone. But here's one of the biggest challenges in life, and then I'll leave you with this. The biggest deterrent that Satan uses in the world is, I'm going to do something someday. I don't care what it is. Someday, I'm going to do it. When it comes to serving your Lord, don't let it be someday. Let it be today. If we can help you in any way, please come forward while we sing the song of invitation.